So good morning VC and any other members of YouTube that are tuning into my video. This is my first video for 2023 and I've actually selected a vinyl tag video. Rob Walker let the music play and this is a video that he put up, 20 questions. I'm going to endeavour to answer them as succinctly as possible, and I want to participate. Last 6 months of 2022 beset with health problems, really difficult to get videos up to you, and I've overcome a fair bit, still some to come. But I hope that I'm on the right track now. So less of this warbling on about my health, and let's get to those questions. Rob's first question was favourite new release of 2022. Well, I actually downloaded, as you know, here in Thailand, no vinyl, so I have to rely on digital format. And I downloaded in excess of 100 albums, but the pick of the bunch, the top of the tree, was an album called Angels in Real Time by Gang of Youths. This is an Australian band, but originally from Sydney, fronted by the principal songwriter David Le Arpep, who sang vocals, wrote all the songs and played lead guitar. They're a rock band with alternative slant, and he also, David Le Arpep, draws on his cultural influences. He is half Samoan, and there is an element of world music intricately linked with the traditional rock sound. It's an absolute gem. It was their third album, and I've stuck it at the top of my tree. Okay, let's continue with Rob Walker's vinyl tag. His second question, last band or solo artist you saw live? Well, since being in Thailand, I've seen quite a number of local performers. If you want to hear Samba Party or Hotel California, they do beautiful versions of those. But as for anything that begs on any originality that's tailored to our likes, forget it. So I've got to go right back to 1992, a gig I saw at the Royal Festival Hall, was it? Royal Concert Hall in Nottingham, and I saw in that year Deacon Blue live, and it was an absolute tremendous concert. Big fan of Deacon Blue. Love the combination of vocals, male and female, Ricky Ross, Lorraine McIntosh. Great solid rock band that uses keyboards and arrangements perfectly. So that's my choice. Third question, first album, the best album by that artist. I came up with two really, no surprises really here. The 1968 debut by Led Zeppelin, I consider that still to be their best because it brought together blues to a rock format which was not heavy rock, but it was heavily blues influenced, and of course it saw the arrival onto our ears of one Robert Plant and Jimmy Page, ably supported by John Bonham and John Paul Jones. And this second one that I run side by side for debut albums being the best is the 1980 debut album by U2 called Boy. Uh, Particularly impressed by this album because the first time I heard it, I was in a restaurant. It was an American style hamburger joint, and I was trying to serenade this young girl on her first date, and she eventually became my wife. But on the date, the food was gorgeous. She was gorgeous, but I kept on getting sidetracked by the music of the band U2 with Boy. It distracted me really from the main agenda. Next up, a hat trick of formats. Electric Ladyland was my choice here for vinyl, CD and cassette. Don't usually go in for different formats. Doesn't appear to be much point in that. It has to be said. We're now on to number 5. Album that starts and ends with the same letter. I ended up predictably picking Revolver, the Beatles album. Didn't want to stretch my mind too far into other sort of dimensions. So let's stick with Revolver. And then question 6, born in the same year as you. I wasn't quite sure what that meant. Did we mean an album that was released in the year of your birth, or an artist born in the same year? So I'm going to give you 2 answers then. First of all, albums that were released in 1954 when I was born, few and far between, but I have actually got one, and it was Song for Young Lovers by Frank Sinatra. Absolutely gorgeous, with his big band behind that crooning voice of his. Artist, same age as me, probably the most famous, and certainly in my opinion one of the greatest, is Elvis Costello, who is also 68. He was born a few months after me, in August. I also came across John Harrington, who's session guitar player with Steely Dan, who was actually born the day after me in 1954. So that just about covers it. Most listened to album in 2022 was I Am the Moon by the Tedeschi Trucks Band. This was one of 4 releases that they had, but this one I particularly played a lot. It just brought back so many memories of listening to the Allman Brothers Band with that added production and beautiful female vocals. Some great guitar playing on this, and very much a sort of southern states feel to it. Picking up murmurings. Our neighbours do have a habit of talking like they've got a loud hailer, and so it's quite easy to hear everything they said, but it is all in Thai, so it won't make much sense to you, but apologies for that. The next one was the most listened artist in 2022. There are only 2 really up for grabs here. Paul Weller, who I love and adore, and Van Morrison. And Van got it basically because I selected lots of material across his discography, particularly 70s and 80s, and some of the newer stuff. And so if I added it all up, I'm sure Morrison would have been feasting my ears with pleasure more than any artist. 9, we've got the Australian artist band. I could have selected Gang of Youths, but I've gone for Midnight Oil, a band that I fell in love with back in the late 80s when I arrived in the down under in Australia. Bought Diesel and Dust in Australia, played it to death, bought lots of other albums by them. They had an album released this year which was very good and also continues to be politically charged. Another reason why I love them so much. 10, surprising purchase. Well, as I don't purchase any album, it had to be a download. And it's the one that was selected by the Needle Drop, a YouTube channel that I do watch. And it was the album by the Mexican singer and songwriter Natalia Lafourcade. It's a new album and it's brilliant. Well, now, and Rob asked to name a great run of free albums by an artist that you acquired and loved. There were a couple of main contenders. There was lots of other sort of 70s bands. I considered Yes at one point with their debut called Yes and Time and a Word and then the Yes album. I considered Genesis from the beginning, Trespass and Nursery Crime, but the first album didn't really come up to scratch, and so I ended up really with two in the hot seats, and I can't really split them really. Firstly, Stevie Wonder, Music of My Mind, Talking Book and Inner Visions, and then the Rolling Stones from 68, 69, 70, Beggar's Banquet, Let It Bleed and Sticky Fingers. I think you'll be hard to match that really as a trio of 5-star gems. Moving on then, we'll get on to soundtracks now. In the 80s, I actually selected two, both performed by Ry Cooder. The 1981 movie Southern Comfort, a very violent tale of life in the South, when a party of macho men decided to visit Louisiana and completely disregard how the locals viewed them. And then Paris, Texas, 1984, yet another Ry Cooder soundtrack. Both of them are absolutely superb. Next up, tragically, Rob asked who we have lost in 2022 that had some significant impact on us. And I struggled a little bit really with this, but I ended up predictably choosing Christine McVie, previously as Christine Perfect. Why? Well, as Christine Perfect back in the late 60s, she was with a band called Chicken Shack, and I saw her live in a very small hall of about 100 people singing and playing piano. I didn't get to see Fleetwood Mac, but I did find that some of the songs that she contributed to these albums were full of emotion, melancholia and impact, and so we're sadly going to be without her in 2023. A non-vinyl purchase, well, of course I haven't had any. And then number 17, a Grail. Well, this is a Grail I found in the digital section, and it's a 1970 album called Elements by 30 A Band. Now 30 A Band were a very mystical Indian Raja like sound, very meditative, and there were no vocals, it was all instrumental. And I saw them on a number of occasions at university gigs, and they usually were on in the afternoon and corresponded with the audience starting to indulge itself in somewhat naughty substances, and I participated myself, and the overall feeling that hippie-like glow remained a very, very impactful experience. And I actually found this album, Elements, which is basically a double album. I think it's a double album with four. No, it's not a double album. It's a single album. There's only 4 tracks on it, and they are Earth, Water, Air, and Fire, which seems to sum up what's important about this planet and human survival. Album, Sleeve Song. Again, I went into 1971, and this was very much reflective of the use of substances. And I've selected an album by Terry Riley called A Rainbow in Curved Air. And it was really an ambient keyboard orientated sonic sound, delivered 2 tracks, one on either side, and it really encapsulated the idea of putting it on and getting spaced out. 19, VCLT or a present. Well, being all the way out here in Thailand, VCLT is difficult really to organise. So I went back to 2 occasions while I was in England. The first one was in 1981. My wife, my first wife, she bought Born to Run on vinyl for me for my birthday. Now I'd had a cassette version of this for since its release in 1975, but to capture the vinyl release made a huge difference and was certainly loved. Even to this day, I've still got it, even though that relationship moved on to an inevitable conclusion. And the second one was, interestingly, this is very much a confession. In I think it was 83, on a birthday, a friend of my wife's bought Let's Dance by David Bowie. Now, up until that time, I had liked Bowie's material, but never got an album by him, really. The singles I liked, but I considered him a bit like a bit of a cowboy, a bit of a, not so much a cowboy, a quirky sexual pop oddity with his bisexuality and his makeup. And I carried around some prejudice at the time, which thankfully I've now ditched. And so I never really got around to buying those albums that everybody owns, like Ziggy Stardust, Hunky Dory, etc., etc. But once I got Let's Dance, which was of course an extremely pop-filled selection, with Stevie Ray Vaughan and Neil Rogers on there, I really certainly recognised the talent, and from there on I've become a complete obsessive about all David Bowie's work. So the last one on Rob's list is, of course, the number 20. I'll show an album released in 1973. Well, there were loads of released in 1973. Uh, but I'm gonna choose an album that, although I loved it and played a lot in 1973, it became even more significant a decade later in my life. And what happened basically was that I was divorced and in an emotional hole. And although I had a good job, I felt very much alone. And I hadn't long finished college, and with a friend who I met at college, I decided to meet him at a location for a holiday in Devon. The place was Dartmouth, and Dartmouth was a naval port, but a very beautiful village. And he went there with his mother every year and stayed in a bed and breakfast and had a glorious time. So I basically decided to drive down and join him there. And once I got there, in this guest house, it became evident that the owner, a middle-aged woman, had a young daughter in her early 20s who was a one-parent family. And what happened? Well, I guess you can go along with what happened. I actually started to become interested in this girl, and we had a relationship of sorts while I was down there, an intimate relationship. And as a result of my cassettes, I had a cassette of Desperado that I played when we were together, and it actually usually previewed sexual activity. I then decided to buy her a vinyl copy, because she had a table of the album. And then for a number of months after that, whenever I had any holiday, even just a weekend break, I used to drive down to her and stay with her. And as soon as we arrived, Desperado went on the turntable. And of course, Desperado, cowboys, traveling, looking for something lost. It seemed to symbolize me traveling to be this girl, to get a little taste of genuine love. And so I thought I'd share that with you. Pretty intimate stuff, eh? But that's what the album that I've chosen for 1973. Okay then, Rob, make that what you will. It's a bit of a strange concoction, but I've enjoyed the thread. That's my lot.